Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parbrahm Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Om Dhyanamoolam Guru Murti Pujamulam Guru Padam Mantramulam Guru Vakya Mokshamulam Guru Kripa. Shivoham friends, I will start today's reading session with yesterday's a very beautiful verse in the chapter 57, verse 37. Bhrantirevam iyam bhati rajvam iva bhujangata kim nashtam asyam nashtayam jatayam kim prajayate. When everything is a dream, what is lost if it is lost? What is gained when it is achieved? So let us now read from 59 chapter onward, in which the Padma and two Leelas live out their liberated lives. Vasishtha said, "Be it so," said Saraswati, and disappeared into the air, and people awoke that morning with their king restored to life. Padma embraced the reborn Leela, who embraced him in her turn. They were exceedingly glad in their coming to life again. The palace was filled with loud shouts of joy, like those of giddy revelry. Citizens were full of mirth and merry song and music. Shouts of victory and sounds of cheers and joys resounded in the air. People elated with joy thronged at the royal courtyard to see their king. The spirits of the masters and demigod Vidyadharas dropped flowers from above, and the sound of drum, kettle, trumpet, and conches resounded on all sides. Outside, elephants roared aloud with uplifted trunks. Crowds of women filled with the inner courtyard with loud rejoicing. Men bearing presents for the king fell upon one another at their mutual clashing. Others, wearing flowery garlands on their heads and hairs, moved gracefully all about. Red turbans of joy on the heads of chiefs and a host of citizens, and the waving of reddish palms of dancing girls filled the sky with a bed of red lotuses. The ground also was strewn with rosy flowers by footfalls of dancers with their reddish soles. The hanging earrings of ballet girls that flourished with the movement of their heads and shoulders waved in the air like flowers of gold. Silken veils like autumn clouds covered the faces of fairy maiden in their dancing. They glittered like so many moons shining in the courtyard. Then people retired to their respective homes with loud applause, for the queen's return with her husband from the other world. King Padma heard of his adventures from the reports of his subjects and made his purificatory ablution with the waters of the four seas of the earth. Then royal ministers and ministerial Brahmins joined together in the act of his installation, like a synod of immortals meeting at the inauguration of Indra. The two Leelas continued in company with the king, describing the delight, their respective adventures, and the wisdom they had gathered thereby. It was in this way that by grace of the genius of wisdom and their own experience, this King Padma and his two queens obtained prosperity equal to that of the three worlds. The king, filled with the wisdom given to him by the goddess, in company with his consorts, continued to rule over his kingdom for thousands of years. In their state of living liberation, they reigned on earth for myriads of years. Then, receiving the perfect knowledge of the holy masters, they became wholly liberated after their deaths. The happy pair, having jointly reigned over their delightful realm of ever increasing population, and which was graced by learned men and righteous people, knowing their own rights and duties of doing good to all mankind, became freed from the burden of their state affairs forever. So this was a very small chapter, and in this new chapter, chapter 60, the heading is time and reality are relative. Interesting, isn't it? Time and reality, even the reality is relative. Vasishtha said, "Prince, I had told you this story in order to remove your error of phenomenal world. Remember this tale of Leela and renounce your misconception of the gross material world. The substantiality of phenomena is nothing by itself. No pains are required to invalidate it. It is hard to disprove a reality, but there is no difficulty to efface a falsehood from the mind. True knowledge consists in seeing phenomena as void and knowing the one emptiness to the soul unity and real unity. In the end, one loses himself in this infinite emptiness. When the self-born Brahma created the world from nothing without the aid of any material or elemental body, it is obvious that there was an eternal void, and that all these are only manifestations of the one empty soul. The same creative soul spread the seeds of its consciousness into the stream of creation, and these produce the images as they constantly appear to us, unless we take the pains to repress them. The appearance of the world is only a perspective of the environment that is divine consciousness. It is contained in the small space of human consciousness within the soul, like in a transparent particle of sand. This being the case, then what is the essence of this false conception? And what are our desires to rely on it? At what can be the meaning of either destiny or necessity? The entire whole that is visible to the eye is only a false appearance, like magic. There is no truth or substance in a magic show. Ram said, "What a wonderful explanation of the world that you have given me. It refreshes my soul. Like moonbeam revive the blades of grass that have been burned down by fire. After so long I have come to know the truly knowable, such as what and how it is, and the manner, how, from where, and when it is to be known. I have my peace and rest in pondering on this wonderful theory, and your elucidation of the doctrines of the Shruti scriptures. But tell me this one thing to remove my doubt, as my ears are never satisfied drinking the nectar-like juice of your sweet speech. How much time elapsed during the 3 births of the Leelas' husband? Was it the duration of a day and night in one case, and of a month in another, and the period of a whole year in the case of Vidura? Or did any one of them live for many years, and whether they were of short or longer durations, according to the measure of man, gods of Brahma? Please, sage, kindly tell me this, because little hearing is not sufficient for me. Like a drop of water is not enough to moisten the parched ground of summer heat. Vasishtha said, "Know, sinless Ram, that whoever thinks of anything in any manner, at any place or time, he comes to feel the same in the same manner and in the same place and time. Take, for instance, a destructive poison that becomes like ambrosia to venomous insects that take it for their dainty nourishment. Similarly, an enemy turns to a friend by your friendly behavior to him. The manner in which any beings consider itself and all others for a length of time becomes the same. They appear by its mode and habit of thinking, as if it were by an act of destiny. The manner in which the active intellect represents a thing in the soul is imprinted in its consciousness of its own nature. The manner in which the active intellect represents a thing in the soul is imprinted in its consciousness of its own nature. When our consciousness represents a twinkling of the eye to extend over a kalp age, we are led to believe a single moment is an age of long duration. When we are conscious of or think a kalp age to be only a twinkling, the kalp age is thought to pass as quickly as a moment. A long night in our unconscious sleep appears as a moment upon waking. The night appears to be a long age to the long suffering sick, while it seems like a moment in the nightly revels of the merry. So a moment appears as an age in the dream, and an age passes off as a moment in the state of unconsciousness. The notions of the resurrection of the dead and of one's reincarnation and being reborn in a new body, of his being a boy, youth, or old man, and of these migrations to different places at the distance of hundreds of leagues are all only the phenomena of sleep and retrospective views in a dream. King Harishchandra is said to have thought a single night to be a dozen years. The prince Lavanna passed his long life of 100 years over the space of a single night. What a moment to Brahma was the entire age of the lifetime of Manu. What is a day to Vishnu constitutes the long period of the lifetime of Brahma. The entire lifetime of Vishnu is only one day of sedate Shiva, one whose mind is motionless in fixed meditation, is unconscious of the change of days and nights and of the seasons and years. There is no substance and no substantive world in the mind of the meditative yogi, to whom the sweet pleasures of the world appear bitter, as they are thought to be the bane of his true joy. The bitter seems to be sweet by being thought to be so. What is unfavorable becomes favorable, as that which is friendly comes to be unfriendly by being taken in their opposite senses. Thus, Ram, it is by habitual meditation that we gain the abstract knowledge of things. We forget what we learn if we do not repeat and practice. By their habit of thinking, some find everything in a state of positive rest, while the unthinking fall into the errors of the ever-moving world. Like a boat passenger thinks the land and objects on the shore are moving around him. The unthinking part of the mankind and those wandering in their error think the world to be moving about them, but the thinking mind sees the whole as an empty void and full of phantoms, like one sees in his dream. It is false thought that shows white as black and blue. It is mistaken judgment that makes one rejoice or sorrow at the events of life. The unthinking are led to imagine a house where there is none. The ignorant are infatuated with the belief in ghosts, as they are the killers of their lives. It is the reminiscence or memory that raises the dream as its consort, and that represents things as they are presented to it by the thoughts of the waking state. The dream is as unreal as the empty void abiding in the hollow receptacle of the intellectual soul. It spreads over the mind like the shadow of a cloud and fills it with the images like those of a puppet show under a magic lantern. Know the phenomena of the revolving world to be no more in reality than mere effects of the vibration of the mind in the empty space of the soul. Like the motions and gestures of imagined hobgoblins to the sight of children. All this is only a magical illusion without any substance or basis of itself. All these imposing scenes of vision are only the empty and aerial sights of dream. Just as a waking man beholds the wonderful world before him, so does a sleeping man see the same. Both of them resemble the unconscious pillar that finds images of statues engraved upon it. The Divine Spirit's great monument is the figure of the created world carved in itself, as if I see a troop of soldiers passing before me in my dream. This waking world sleeps in the soul of Brahma and rises in his mind like the plant world springs from sap lying hidden in the earth that gives it its growth and spring bloom. Likewise, creation lies hidden in and springs from the Supreme Spirit, like the brightness of gold ornaments is contained in and comes out of the material metal. Every atom of creation is settled in the fullness of Divine Spirit. Just like all the members of the body are set in the person of their possessor. The visible world has the same relation to the bodiless and undivided Spirit of God as one fighting in a dream bears to his enemy. Thus the real and unreal, the spirit and the world, all dwindles into emptiness at the great fantasy annihilation of creation. Except the consciousness of God, which comprises the world in itself. The causality of the one and the unreality of the world cannot both be true, since nothing unreal can come out of the real. So, except Brahman, there is no other cause, whether Brahma the creator or any other. The divine consciousness is the only cause and substance of its productions. Now Ramji asked, but what caused the citizens, councillors and ministers of Vidurath's royal house to appear in Leela's vision in the same manner as that of our Lord the King? Vasishtha said, all other thoughts are associated with the principal one in the intellect. In the same manner as high winds accompany a storm, the association of thoughts follows one another in a long and perpetual train, and one after the other cause the succession of the sights of the ministers, citizens, and subjects of the king in Leela's vision. In this way, the thought that the king was born of such and such a family naturally introduced the thoughts of his palace and city and of those that dwelt in them. It is vain to inquire into the cause and manner of consciousness and each combination of its thoughts. This is why it is called the gem of thoughts, Chintamani. It is always accompanied with its radiating thoughts like a brilliant gem with its rays. Padma thought to become a king like Vidurath, properly discharging the duties of his royal family. This constant thought of himself as such cast the mold of the mind and manner of Vidurath upon him. All animate beings of every kind are only models of their thoughts, like looking glasses showing their inner reflections to sight. The mind fixed in meditation on God remains unshaken amidst the turmoil of the world and is filled with perfect rest and preserves the composure of the soul until its final liberation from the bondage of the body. But thoughts of fluctuating enjoyments of this world, alternately represented in the mirror of the mind, are like the shadows of passing scenes upon a looking glass. Therefore, it requires a great force of mind to overcome its worldly thoughts and turn them to the channel of truth. Just like the greater force of a river's main current leads its tributaries to the ocean. But when worldly and spiritual thoughts press upon the mind with equal force, the mind is greatly disturbed. Then the greater force leads it onward in one way or the other. Such is the case with all myriads of beings, whether they are living, dead, or to come to life. The same accidents take place in the particles of all human minds. All this is the empty sphere of consciousness, all quiet and without any basis or substratum. It is neither pupilled nor filled by anything except its own native thoughts. All these appear as dreams even in our unsleeping states and have no form or figure in the sight of the wise. The perception of their positive existence is only a misconception of their negative non-existence. There really exists only one omnipotent and all-pervasive spirit, which shows itself in the diverse forms like flowers, fruits, and tree leaves, all appearing from the same woody trunk. He who knows the uncreated Brahman to be the measure, and the thing measured to be all one, and himself can never forget this certain truth of unity, nor ever fall into the dualism error of cause and effect. There is only one being who is holy and without beginning and end, and whom, though he appears to have forms of light and darkness, and of space and time, never rises or sets anywhere. He is without beginning, middle, or end. He remains like a vast expanse of water, exhibiting itself in its waves and currents. The notion of myself, yourself, and the objective world are only expressions of our perverted understandings. It is only ignorance within the sheath of the mind, accordingly as it imagines it to be, that shows the one as many. This whole chapter is fully loaded with spiritual knowledge. I would love to read this in Hindi and Sanskrit as well. This 60th chapter. And I would say Shivom here, and by the grace of Lord Ram, we will again meet to read next chapter onwards of Vasishtha Maharana.